Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Keep Calm and Recruit Lean. My name is Rachel Vasquez, and I'm on the marketing team here at Jobvite. Today, we've teamed up with our partners at Bamboo HR to go over the tips and tricks to recruiting more people with fewer resources, and we've seen a great response to this topic. But before we get started, if you have any questions, please use the chat feature at the bottom of the Ready Talk panel. I'll be monitoring it throughout the webinar and saving all your great questions for our presenters until the very end. Also, this webinar will be recorded, and you will receive the recording, slides, SHRM, and HRCI credits following tomorrow morning. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers, JD from Bamboo HR and Jan from Jobvite. Who'd like to begin?
So I can begin. My name is Jan, as Rachel had mentioned. I've been with Jobvite for about 4 years and have experienced most of the time on what it's like to recruit with a very lean team and resources. Look forward to sharing our tips and tricks.
Awesome. And I am JD. I've been over at Bamboo for a few years here. I've worked a lot in third-party recruitment, as well as doing technical in-house positions and team management for the recruiters. One of the things that I really love being able to do is improve the process, so that's why I'm really excited to be a part of this today.
Great, and let's kick it off.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. Many of you might have found yourself in a position similar to what I did when I joined Jobvite. We're about 85 total employees, and we were looking to double in a year. And we had, 2 people on the team with very, very limited resources. And we'll be during the rest of the webinar, I'll be sharing with you some tips and tricks of ways that I found were best practices of how we were able to be successful in doing that. So I wanted to share some industry stats, and so here's something that we found is that 56% of recruiters need to hire more people this year than the previous year. And your hiring headcount changes year to year, but it can also change quarter to quarter depending on how the business does, especially in small companies. That I know that those numbers are always changing, and needing to be flexible with that is definitely important in a really lean team. Another really interesting stat is that even though a company might be growing very quickly, 60% of recruiters don't anticipate any additional recruiting headcount. So they are expected to do more with less. And having a very lean team, there are different ways that you can do to stretch your recruiting practices to accommodate this growth, even if you don't have any additional headcount on your team. And, also on top of not having additional headcount, 52% of recruiters report that their budgets would remain stagnant. And so it just involves a lot of creativity to be able to stretch every dollar that they have to make the biggest impact in attracting top talent to join in ways that don't always cost more money. Another challenge that you might be facing, especially if you're a small company, is that it can be harder to attract talent, especially passive talent, when you don't have a strong employment brand. When you use different tools to reach out to people that might be employed, if you're reaching out from a company they've never heard of, it's definitely less likely to receive a response back. So it's definitely easier when you work for a well-known brand or a consumer brand when you do reach out to passive candidates. And even if you don't have an internal resource to run employer branding or recruiting marketing programs, there's always ways that as a small company you can take measures to be able to put your company and the word out there that your company is hiring and what a great place it is to work. Another challenge that can be faced when you're a lean recruiting team is that an economy with very low unemployment rate, 4.1%, which hasn't changed since October last year, what we've seen is that more than half of people out there that we've surveyed in our 2017 Job Seeker Nation report, 64% of people are satisfied with their work. However, 81% are open to new job opportunities. And 89% of recruiters think it will get more competitive over the next year, according to our 2017 Recruiting Funnel Benchmark report. So as a result, businesses are doing everything they can to decrease their time to hire. In 2015, the average time to hire decreased all the way down to 43 days. And then 2016, that moved down even lower to 39 days to fill on average. So, JD, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, Jan, thanks so much for pointing those things out. Point is, everyone, Jan and I feel you. We understand it's difficult out there. We've been in the trenches before and are continuing to be in our own trenches right now. And it's rough. We all recognize that the job market, we've been talking about this for years, that it continually becomes a job seeker's market. You see reports on the news about employment being as low as it is, and the stats that Jan just shared with us. And one of the things that we're dealing with here in my state, in Utah, is we have the highest job growth rate in the country at 2.9%, and we're in the bottom grouping of 10 states with the lowest unemployment. So it's really fiercely competitive, and there's quite a lot of things that we can do and things we can't do right now. And I think one of the challenges that there are so many ways we can divide up our time, and Jan and I recognize this in that. You get on these webinars and everyone says, here's the one thing you need to do, or here's all the things you need to do at once. So that's why we wanted to address this here. And we have these key players, these stakeholders that are so important to what we're doing in order to make sure we make the right choices in such a difficult market. So this first part is that it's easy for HR leadership to see these stats like this, and for all of us to panic. There's some main groups that really have a stake in your recruiting that we need to communicate these things to, and allow us to make the right choices early on and recruit lean. So with the leadership and hiring managers that we're communicating with, we need to develop good plans. And for too many recruiting programs, people outside of HR recruiting, they just don't have a clear understanding of everything that goes into an effective requisition. But we have a big picture, everyone. So because they have more of a narrow focus on short, specific pain from their recruiting needs, and because they are feeling that, they're feeling the pain, they just want people to solve the problem and ease their pain, we want to limit it as much as possible. So since they want it to end, we can focus exclusively on communicating, hey, we understand your pain points, help me out so I can help you out. Instead of focusing on speed all the time, we need to focus on the bigger picture. So what are these pain points? First thing is leadership pain points, right? They care about contribution on their timetable. They want people to be contributing when the organization needs their contribution. They're also accountable to hiring managers for solving their issues. If hiring managers are saying, I don't have enough labor or people to be able to handle the things that you are throwing at my team or something like that. They also want to maximize the long-term potential of the company. So there's the potential for strategic FOMO, right, of fear of missing out. If we don't do it, oh my gosh, our competition is going to do it. And they might feel that if you don't fill all of your open positions with the best candidates right now, like how many times have we heard this phrase, when we ask, okay, when do you need this person to be in place? And the funniest answer to me, and the one that sometimes just makes me cringe, is yesterday. And raise your hand. I'm not looking at you right now, but raise your hand if you've heard that. Yesterday. It's always yesterday. So the problem is we need it right now, and if not, if we don't get them quickly, then somebody else is going to snap up these best candidates, and we're going to miss out on what could have been. Then we have these hiring manager pain points, right? These are legitimate. So sometimes I I really do feel for them sometimes. It is very difficult when they're dealing with things like turnover to be able to make sure they're getting the people they need. These worries are more immediate. How many weeks do we need to operate without being fully staffed? Is the question that they're asking themselves. The longer this goes on, the greater the stress of the manager and the teams, and the organization starts paying more for overtime and reduced engagement and loss of productivity. So there's only so much a team can take before morale drops and even more people start leaving. And then you have a backfill as well as a growth problem. Yes, growth can sometimes be a problem. It's great, but we got to be able to manage it really well. So we're not saying these pain points aren't real, but in trying to solve these pain points, often it's just having the recruiter do more with less support, and it's a short-term fix that leads to even greater costs in the long run. So that's why we wanted to focus on that today. Brings us to our message, keep calm and recruit lean. Because with the right levels of education, communication, and coordination, our recruiting programs can address and resolve all of these worries step by step. So first thing in jumping into that, let's put this more in this perspective for an actual analogy here. Imagine your stakeholders are kitchen staff in a fancy restaurant. We'll call leadership the head chef for this one, creating new dishes, pairing up courses, setting up the menu, really defining what the restaurant is going to be doing and the quality of that. The hiring managers, really we'll call them the sous chefs, specializing in various parts of the menu, like maybe sauces or desserts or wine pairings. So how do you know if a restaurant is successful? It's not just because customers ate their food and paid for it. It's a restaurant succeeds based on its ongoing reputation. When diners keep coming back for more and more and keep recommending this place to their friends. It's not just about one night's service, but continued success. So your organization has a candidate experience, hoping that the candidate will stick with them and have a great employee experience. It's the same thing with recruiting. An effective recruiting takes coordinated effort from leadership, managers, and recruiters. Otherwise, you're going to severely limit the quality of your new hires and the potential of your recruiting program. So here's the question. Does your leadership see you as part of the kitchen staff, or are you much more like a fast food worker who just takes orders? And sometimes this is a problem that's self-inflicted. We will have somebody come to us and say, or we'll get certain requisitions thrown at us, and we'll say, we salute and say, yep, I got that, because we don't want to not be awesome at recruiting. We don't want to not be amazing and effective and that go-getter, and don't worry, my time to fill is negative 2 days or something, right? So we want to do that, but sometimes we're creating more of a problem for ourselves by doing that. That brings us this aspect of fast food recruiting. It's when recruiters rush to handle everything on their own. And we might as well be a fast food worker, maybe keeping up with the lunch rush as long as we're sticking to a few familiar menu items, right? And this fast food style, recruiters tend to, they tend to stick with a few familiar requisitions and hope that they have enough time to handle these special orders, or that the managers don't change their mind when they realize they need additional skills. And we're often feeling this pretty constantly, where what is ordered will be changed mid-order or something like that, and we function more like fast food recruiters when we should be functioning more like, the well-run fine dining establishments. One of the problems is, for instance, we will post as many places as possible, hoping that finding a larger quantity of candidates will bring the one that fits well enough. And often in this situation, the relationship between recruiting and leadership is one-sided. We're rushing to fill as many of these orders from leadership as possible, with the sense that this won't be enough. We can feel it. Can you feel it? Because the recruiters I talk to, we can all feel that's one of the problems there. And this style of recruiting leads to trade-offs in the employee experience. And we'll explore this more later in the webinar, but focusing on speed also increases the risk of a mishire. So it can have major consequences to our organization. I'm going to run over this real quick. I think you guys are often bombarded with stats of turnover, but this is an example here. We took some of the basic costs from a 2017 SHRM Human Capital Report, and they calculated the average turnover rate. Your industry might be very different than this. Certain departments might be very high or low compared to this, but the average turnover rate is 18%. And if we just talked about replacing an employee who earns just $10 an hour, just for easy math there, you're likely to spend about $3,500 to replace. And then our mid-range employees earning $40K or above, right? The cost is $8,000 for that. Again, we're being pretty conservative in our estimates here. When you get to salaries with positions above $100K, you're looking for a few $100,000 per replacement. So we've shown this example of what would happen in your organization even if it's only 100 people in your organization and an average turnover rate of 19%. So you're going to have to replace 18 people every year, and that means your company is spending this $90,000 every year on turnover. So this is the long-term information that you need to communicate to your leadership to help put their pain in perspective so you can change things up front. So this 5-star recruiting, in contrast here, effective recruiting really focuses on making the best use of your time that you have. Jan and I understand you can't do everything all the time, and sometimes we want to. We see all the things we could do in recruiting, but we have to make smart choices, and that means trading some short-term pain for more solid long-term positions, including increased retention rates. A big part of this recruiting is having fewer mishires and focusing on that. Improving relationships and reputation and time to hire. Better value for your training budget. These are important things about making choices with your recruiting budget that increases the value of it. We have to sit back and make very focused decisions there. Improved employee morale and engagement happens when you have this kind of recruiting as well. So where does it start? How do you go from where so many of us find ourselves, from fast food to 5-star recruiting? And it starts with getting on the same page as your leadership and hiring managers and making sure that everyone understands everything that goes into a requisition. So just a quick discussion about this slide here, just jumping into how we prioritize these different pieces and prioritizing your requisitions. And it's helping us shift from reaction mode to pre-planned collaboration. It's a better experience for everyone involved here. It just takes some practice to do it, and sometimes it's painful when you start it. So returning to our restaurant metaphor here, completing a job description is much like preparing a meal. Each of these steps takes time, and delays at any point can affect the final product. If something is on the back burner too long and it cooks too long or is undercooked or something like that, the final product we're talking about here is your applicant's experience as far as having an effect on your hiring. So first, it takes time for hiring managers to put requisitions together and get approval for recipe of the job duties and all these needed skills. Then it takes time to craft the job description and make sure that that is not just in the ingredients, but also how it's plated and presented. It's one of the things I think we fail to make time for, even though we wish we could do it better, is we will just chuck out whatever job description has been handed to us, rather than really looking at it as a piece of marketing content there. So the job description gets posted. There's more time before applicants respond. And then finally we get to the applicant experience itself, where people take time. This is a bigger piece, right? It's where people take time to fill out applications, complete phone screens, come in for interviews. And this takes time for one single requisition. And unfortunately, there's rarely a time when you have one single requisition. I don't know if I've heard that from any recruiter, maybe ever. So these coordination delays, these requisition coordination delays here, one of the problems is that we keep adding on more requisitions. Again, sometimes it's a self-inflicted problem. We say, okay, I can handle that. Wanting to be able to handle that, but what is better is that we can do some things very, very well and put other things on the back burner for later. So especially when these stakeholders are involved in any part of the process for other requisitions, the communication needed up front, a hiring manager can only spend so many hours like building job descriptions and conducting interviews. So we have to parse that well. These delays multiply as you add more requisitions and more decision makers you have to communicate with, make plans with, as they take vacation or go through busy seasons in their day jobs. It's about volume versus recruiting quality. So there's delays between interviews when this doesn't work. There's all these delays between interviews that could be a little bit faster. There's periods of incommunicado with candidates. We've all been there. We've all been there, right? Where candidates didn't hear from us, so they moved on, or they didn't hear fast enough, or maybe we didn't clearly talk about the expectations of timelines or something like that. And this candidate experience really matters. I'll just go over this really quick. And we know this, we talk about this. I think many people, if this is not your first webinar, you've heard many of us in this thought leadership circle focus on candidate experience. The main thing I want to focus on is this last point. Of those, so 60% of job seekers had this poor candidate experience. And of those 60% who had a poor candidate experience, 72% are sharing the information on an employer review site like Glassdoor or a social networking site, or directly with a colleague or friend. And that hurts your recruiting brand. It hurts your ability long term to capture more people and give the message of your company. Okay, so starting the conversation now. You really want to get ahead of the lead time conversation as your executives plan out their strategy. And what I mean by lead time conversation, it is, hey, what are your plans? Let's talk about these different departments, some of their growth patterns. I feel like this happens to various degrees at different companies, but all too often, recruiting is not truly able to plan ahead, or talent acquisition is not truly able to plan ahead because they find themselves maybe too out of the loop. And 2 quarters ahead is what we do over here at Bamboo. That can be ideal. 2 quarters ahead allows you to make decisions on recruitment marketing tools and functions, HR technology that you want to adopt and maybe implement before some big business decisions happening. Y'all are going to blow up as far as size, and 3 departments are going to expand by another 80% each. So it allows you to have enough time to build that in, also find another recruiter or more recruiters or 3 more recruiters and bring value through their training, get them up to speed before these big things happen. It also helps us plan ahead of our organization's tipping point where we may have too many requisitions to keep up with here. So if your organization is new to this line of thinking, look at national and local averages, and that can help you gauge a reasonable time to hire. And I use Utah hiring market as an example, right? We take these stats and we say, okay, what are other people experiencing? Why is this the case? And what are the factors in these time to hires? So as you plan ahead, you can factor in busy seasons, right, for bad times for hiring managers of certain teams. And one of the conversations, just a quick example, is I'll have a conversation with a hiring manager that says, hey, I really need to hire 6 people in these different functions. And I'll say, okay, well, is your calendar fully up to date? I mean, it's the little things, everyone. It's the little things. Are you going on vacation for a long period of time? Because I thought you said you were doing that. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Okay, well, then we need to plan ahead for that, so that way we don't have an unnecessary delay and I got to, keep 80 people happy in the meantime. So that's one particular thing. There's popular vacation times or absenteeism in general that just happens. So we got to plan ahead for those things. And crunching our backfill to understand what are our backfill rates. Until we bring turnover down, then we just have to operate under this assumption that backfill and turnover and retention problems are going to create long-term workloads for us. So because there are so many of these unknowns in our hiring process that we need to know, we need to try to understand, if we understand these things, it gives us the cushion that we need. It gives us the cushion to plan ahead. And with all of this, the goal is to reduce the downtime wherever possible. And there's an excellent principle that helps with this. I've kind of alluded to this so far. And it is this principle of choosing, focusing, finish, and repeat. This is very popular over here at Bamboo. It's a very big deal. Our COO has talked about it. I've just seen so much value in being able to choose not to do something sometimes. If your requisitions are past your tipping point, and if you're listening to this webinar, then they very well might be, then it becomes a question of what do you choose? Which requisitions do you put into your plan? And how can you communicate with leadership the problems and ramifications that happen if we don't prioritize requisitions and say, we can keep this one posted, or we can look for this one, but if you give us a 4-week buffer here, or wait for this other position to close, or these other 9 positions to close, as sometimes it is, then we can actually deliver well and have an impact on turnover retention. So which parts do you shelve for later? Which parts do you scrap altogether? Choose not to do something. There's a lot of power in that. And part of this conversation has come from your executive leadership, but it's an essential conversation to have with them, with leadership, with hiring managers. And it's worth fighting for, my friends. So with that, one of the key aspects that we're talking about here, I'll let Jan take that from here.
All right, great. Thanks, JD. Why don't we get into the next section? And kind of what JD was referring to before, the fast food method versus the 5-star method. And fast food method is what you're likely doing today, and it's kind of a post and pray method. It's posting on the careers page about the different roles that you have, and really just hoping that employees might see it, and that would increase employee referrals. However, there's a lot of things that you can do to partner with the employees and the leadership team to be able to develop your employee referral program into one that's a 5-star method, and just to build a really strong recruiting method throughout your entire organization. So let's go into a little more detail of what that might look like. So the key is really to educate your employees. Make sure that all of them are really aware of the different roles that are available in the company. Often employees do know what open roles are available on their immediate team, but they might not be aware kind of cross-functionally. Often there are roles, I know sometimes we do, is we keep roles open as evergreen pipeline recs, year-round. So employees know when they look on our career page, they don't always know what's a real open role that we're recruiting for and looking to fill versus one that's kind of posted around year-round is like an evergreen rec. So really finding a way to educate and communicate to the employees what those actual recs are, and really emphasizing the impact that the recruiting has on the company culture. It's really everyone's job, and it's really a partnership. It's not just the recruiter's job. We know that a lot of stats have shown that referrals tend to be very high-quality candidates. They tend to perform better. They tend to stick around longer. And so, this is just a really great way to expand your team. And referrals, kind of as an added bonus, also have a lower cost per hire. And so how can you equip your employees to make them employee referral machines? One is to kind of educate them on the different tools that are available. For us at Jobvite, we're fortunate to have our tool that we can use, and our tool integrates with all the social media tools that employees use day to day. So linking with Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, it's really easy to use our tool to be able to kind of put the word out there through social media about the open roles. And if someone clicks on a link that you've projected through email or social media, and that person applies, it gets linked directly into our system, and it indicates them as an employee referral. So that's a tool that's been really helpful to us internally. Spreading the word about open requisitions. So whether it's announcing it at all-hands meetings, sending out regular emails, just putting the word and communicating cross-functionally about all the open roles. And also something that has been really fun is to have team sourcing parties. Even though we ask people all the time just to look through their networks, we sometimes like to set aside specific time for departments to come together and with support from their leadership team to have a little bit of a lunch party, cater in lunch, invite all the employees to come in for a lunch session, bring their laptops, and spend that time to really train them on how to look through their network, how to send out Jobvites and how to position and reach out to those passive candidates in their own networks about the opportunities that you might have at your company. And, when someone is hired as an employee referral, really to celebrate that, to call that out during all hands and bring recognition to the fact that we've been able to bring great candidates on board through employee referral. So whether that's like the team competition, department by department, just finding creative ways to just incent someone outside the department to be able to partake.
Awesome. This is actually something I just wanted to pipe in, and Jan was very gracious to be like, "Yeah, go ahead, take this thing." There's this aspect of referral training and the sourcing parties. Love that idea, and one of the things that it does, the added benefit that it does, is it helps people understand more. If we're not giving good referral training, sometimes people don't understand a bit more of the process, and we're able to answer some questions as we do this about, hey, why wasn't my friend or former colleague or something like that? Why weren't they hired? They were more than qualified. So the more we educate and give referral trainings, the better yield we're going to have long term. Because one of the problems that you have if you don't do this piece, then you're going to get this referral burnout. You're going to have an issue with, why should I give a referral when the last 6 referrals I worked so hard for went nowhere? And part of it is empowering them to do it well, just like Jan was talking about, really involving them in the process, and just like that great idea of a sourcing referral party. So that aspect of engagement with the employees is just so vital, and communicating the what and the why as you're giving referral training. Some of the things that we do here, which I can go into another time, but this aspect of engaging with everyone, just as important as it is with engaging with your candidates, which I'll let Jan jump into again there.
Great. So let's talk a little bit more about different ways that you can engage with candidates. This is something that's very near and dear to our heart here at Jobvite, as in really been evangelizing the idea of continuous candidate engagement. So let's talk a little bit about that. So candidate experience is about how a candidate feels about those interactions and the impression that they have about your brand. And so like I mentioned before, if you're a small company, you might not have a big brand name out there. However, it's never too late to start developing a brand. And the fastest way that brand awareness really travels is by word of mouth. So, you definitely want to keep that in mind as every candidate walks through your front door to ensure that they have a fantastic experience. All the stakeholders that, go into molding what that candidate experience involves is everyone that the candidate would come across with, the hiring managers, the different teammates that they might be interviewing with, the executives that they might see around the office, even the receptionist who greets them when they come in. All those little factors really kind of accumulate into like their overall kind of impression and the experience that they have about the company. And sometimes decisions are made and impressions, those first impressions run really deeply and they last a long time. So you want to make sure that you really start off on the right foot. And that impression can also start even prior to them stepping in for their first interview, because with social media and different websites like career sites and Glassdoor profiles, there's a lot of just transparency into what employees have experienced working at a certain company. So I know for me, and when I speak to candidates when they come in, like most of them have already done their homework and know a lot about the culture, and they've done their research, they've read the Glassdoor profile reviews, and they know. I'm always surprised by how much they already know about what it's like to work there every day. So it's something that you want to take a very active approach in managing. And not be just passively kind of reacting to different things that are posted, but to take an active approach and really managing and promoting and growing that branding of your company. Another thing that we love to do is pre-boarding. Sending swag to their home if they're going to be a remote employee. There's often like 2 to 4 weeks from the time that a person accepts the role to the time that they show up on their first day, and we like to keep them engaged as much as possible. And so during that time, we send them some fun Jobvite swag in the mail just to get them really psyched up to start, and make sure that we keep them warm by having people on the team and the hiring manager just to check in with them to see how it went when they resigned, to offer their advice on how to have that difficult conversation, and just to kind of check in with them and keep them warm kind of during that process. So here's a little snapshot of things that we do. So on the left side is what an average new hire's desk looks like on their first day. So that's kind of what they'll see on their desk. We do a Jobvite. We invest in a really nice hoodie, a t-shirt, give them a moleskin, pen, coffee mug, and water bottle. What you don't see is that on their chair, it's going to have a welcome sign with their name, their title, and kind of what office they're going to be working out of, because if they're not even if they're not based in our HQ office, we always fly new hires on site for their first week, just so they can experience the company culture, do their onboarding on site, and kind of get to know the team on site as well. We also hang balloons on their chair, because when people walk by, they'll know exactly who the new people are, and they know to come by and say hello, because there'll be balloons attached to their chair. We also have a fun program called Rookie Cookies, where new hires are encouraged to, it's not required, but encouraged to bring homemade cookies on their first day. And when their manager sends an intro email out to the entire company introducing the new hire, we always mention, come by, say hello to them, introduce yourself, because they have rookie cookies at their desk. So that's always a great way to make sure that the new hire, just for the first day, has a great experience in getting to meet as many people and are welcomed as much as possible. On the right hand, there's a different moleskin, a small one. That's what we give to candidates when they check in at the front door to interview. We give them a water bottle, we give them a little moleskin to take notes during their interview, and we also include a little Jobvite pen as well. About 2 weeks after an on-site interview, we always send candidates this quick candidate experience survey. So we send it to them through SurveyMonkey, so it's a free tool that any of you can use. We keep it really short and sweet. So we ask them a few questions on a scale of 1 to 10 about what their experience was like, and then just a couple questions with text boxes for them to be able to give any comments and feedback. And our intention for this is, we want to hear from them. We want to know what their experience was like. We want to know what we can do to improve the process. And we also want to give them a place to be able to air their voice and be heard without necessarily having to go to Glassdoor or other places to be able to feel like their voices need to get heard. So this is a great place for us to quickly collect feedback, and we like to roll it up at the end of the year. So we'll know that overall, candidates who came in sales kind of had this type of experience or that type of experience. And if we notice any negative trends, we know that we can address them and fix it, and make sure that we're hearing back from candidates to do everything that we can to make sure that they have a fantastic experience. And from there, I'll hand it over to JD to talk about crafting the perfect job description.
Awesome. So we've talked about these aspects, and Jan has really spoken to these pieces of creating a recruiting culture. That's something that you can start now in small pieces. You can start doing a few things right now. You don't have to do everything all at once. Again, just choosing to do some things that will have a long-term impact now. One of these other things that Jan and I wanted to discuss today was this aspect of crafting the job description, because all of your candidates are going to have different tastes, right? So here's the spices, back to that metaphor we talked about before. And as you're crafting your job description, it's important to get the recipe just right. The menu that will, I guess, entice as well as self-select, or as put in some screeners there. So the right job description helps hiring managers get the candidates they're looking for while respecting candidates' time as well, right? Allowing some self-selection factors in there. So we go back to this analogy here of the fast food method versus the 5-star method. And this fast food style recruiting program doesn't put a lot of thought into the job description. And again, raise your hand if you've been guilty or have seen this done. I'm visualizing how many people might be raising their hands right now. You just get a job description from somewhere, whether it comes from an HRBP or it comes from the manager themselves. Not always does it come from the writing team or something like that. Where do these job descriptions come from? Or did you desperately go, oh, we've never really hired for something like that before, so let me check everyone else's postings in the region out there or something like that, right? So that just ends up being a continued practice there. And if a person leaves and you haven't looked at that person's or that position's job description since you hired them 2 years ago, sometimes you don't have a lot of time to put some thought into the job description. And you have too much to do to replace this valuable person, so you need to tag team with the hiring manager to put together something that's very well done as opposed to just chucking up on a job board whatever you had before. So what do lots of people do, right? They ask the manager to write the job description without really any guidelines or input, or sometimes there's this very daunting task for them. So you can post something ASAP. Hey, write this up for me, or maybe I'll write up the best I can. So you end up with usually an exhaustive list of very specific skills and attributes that narrows the candidate pool all too well. A better program has recruiters working with hiring managers to find the right balance of day one skills versus required training, right? What is actually going to be trained? I think sometimes we create, it's the common, we take a lot of pride in recruiting about finding the purple squirrel. Well, many times I think it's an even higher game to be able to deconstruct and say, do you really need that purple squirrel? Like, do you really need that? Because we get excited about it. But so I just wanted to talk about this in the job description format here. Here's what you should consider as you write the job description with your hiring manager. First, what are the 5 keys or 5 skills that a person really needs for this job? 5 key skills. They are core functions. They're not an extensive list of everything that the last person did. They are core functions. So start by outlining these 5 essential functions that the future employee will perform. And fun psychology fact here, the human brain can only hold between 5 and 9 pieces of information in short-term memory. And that's why we remember phone numbers as 3 groups of numbers instead of 10 individual numbers. So keeping this in mind can help your candidates get the full scope when you're writing the job ad, get the full scope of the job while reducing the need to reread, or maybe they missed something, right? Plus, it can also help your hiring manager focus on what he or she really needs to be looking for in a candidate during the next step of interviewing, as opposed to some of the peripheral tasks. Next, what's this person going to spend most of their time doing? What tasks can be learned after being hired? List the time spent on main daily duties and also occasional peripheral tasks. It's good to have that context, even if you're not going to put it into the job ad or job description. It's good to have that context when you're discussing this with candidates. And this will help you emphasize the right points in your posting. For example, if your employee's only going to spend, if they're going to spend 75% of their time, doing email communications, right? That sounds like a rough job, but and maybe only 5% doing writing a script for something. Listing both as main points of the job is likely going to give one skill more emphasis than is necessary. Third, how is success really going to be measured for this position? Is it based on quantity or quality? Is the team collaborative or competitive? I guess these goals, how are they measured as far as revenues, leads, user ratings, some other metrics? And the reason why I have this is because we have to, if you have things dialed in like this at the very beginning, then it creates a lot of clarity that leads that leads to a streamlined process, as opposed to sometimes you have a reset requisition where a month later or 2 weeks later you go, I think we needed to look for something else. How much time is wasted there? So if you jump into this final aspect, how much experience should they really have? Now that you've broken the rest of the description down, how much training are we going to be able to provide? And it's at this point you can fine-tune your job posting based on your training capabilities. So be honest about that, be clear about that up front. The experience trap, which I'll move a little bit faster through here, is too often we're screening people out that can do the job well, even without those 10 years of experience in GarageBand or something like that, right? So too often we'll get a requisition and they'll say, man, I need all of these things and I need this kind of experience. It lengthens the time to hire, which at some point you have to examine, if the time to hire is going to be this long, how much can you just train as soon as you have somebody in place that has these core functions in there? So that's what I would say briefly, is making sure that the hiring managers don't fall into the experience trap. So when we look at our applicant pool, there are two considerations here. And this is how the job ad is going to factor in here. We want to shrink our pool of unfit applicants from the job ad while including as many good applicants as possible. By creating a description that's an accurate reflection of the position, you can cut out a massive amount of time that you would otherwise spend screening people you don't need to screen. And the description does the screening for you. So that's why I say I hope we invest a couple hours in this, maybe 2 hours in something like the job description and the job ad can save you hours and hours and hours later. And this description, I guess, narrows your funnel really, so it's easier from the start. You don't have to waste time sifting through a bunch of mismatched resumes. Would you rather see 100 applicants but only 25 are potential good fits for the job? Or would you rather receive only 25 applicants and 20 of them are potential fits for the job? You just saved a lot of your time there. So let's take a look at this chart here, and the circle we saw that we just looked at was the other end of this funnel for good applicants. It's clear at the left that at the beginning of the timeline and the mouth of the recruiting funnel, and if I had more space on the slide, I'd make the application phase of the funnel, 10 to 50 times bigger here. There are endless possibilities for customizing your job application, and you only get the applicants you ask for. But in this example, the job description is pulling a large amount of qualified applicants. It's centered around the essentials of the job and optimized for including applicants that may not be purple squirrels, but that have the right base skills, core functions, and experience for training for the position. So start with the right place there. If not, then you run into this problem here. In this one, if the job posting was on target, I guess the job posting was on target, but they added too many qualifications into their search for the purple squirrel. And by the time they got to the interview phase, they narrowed it down to just 2 applicants. They made the offer to 1. They accepted at first, only accept a counteroffer, right? If it's that narrow and you finally find somebody and then they drop off, or a couple of people, finally found a few people, and they all drop off, then you've just missed everything. You have to restart at the beginning of it. So I hope that's a helpful visualization there for that. And I'll let Jan jump into this aspect of measuring some of the quality of these pieces here.
Okay, great. Thanks, JD. So let's spend a few minutes just talking about different ways that you can measure some helpful metrics just to see the effectiveness of your recruiting practices. So there's a fast food method and a 5-star method. And in a fast food method, and I know what happens very often in very lean teams when things are moving quickly and there's very kind of limited headcount and resources on the team, is that the only stat that matters is headcount, just that the roles are filled. And there's really no time to kind of make any changes and do all the things that JD was talking about in terms of tweaks to the recipe or the way that you're approaching job descriptions or any of that sort. So that's a very fast food method. And let's talk about different ways that you can change your metrics to be that of a 5-star method. So in terms of like the necessary metrics, I think on the next slide we'll get into what the different necessary metrics are. You want to really be able to measure in a very quantifiable way just how effective your different career websites are. So whether it's your company's career page or the different job boards that you're investing in, you really want to be able to find a way to be able to measure just how many click-throughs you get, how many applicants that you're receiving as a result of that by referring to your applicant tracking system and seeing just where applicants are coming from. You can see if it's been a good place for you to invest kind of the company's resources, as well as the time to hire and being able to measure that department by department as well as year by year. So, for example, according to Jobvite's 2017 Recruiting Funnel Benchmark Report, the average time to hire was 39 days in 2016 and down from 43 days the year prior to that. The cost per hire, I would say this is probably the most important recruiting metrics, especially if you're going to be socializing that to your executive team, is you want to be able to show that you are being kind of resourceful with the money that's being invested by the company into the recruiting organization and wanting to keep that cost down as low as possible. The average cost per hire, I think it really depends also on location and different role that you're trying to fill, whether it's technical or non-technical. But in 2016, it was about $4,100. And cost per hire is really important to measure across source as well, so you can see if the different tools that you're investing in is really kind of making an impact and worth reinvesting in the future. Net Promoter Score. This is something that we had initially rolled out in our customer success organization as a way to measure how satisfied our customers were and the customer support that they were receiving. But we actually started transitioning this idea and the calculations around the Net Promoter Score to candidate experience as well. So everyone is either considered a promoter or a detractor. And this really ties back to the whole candidate experience portion that we're discussing before. And so, depending on, how they rate the company, we can know if they're which bucket that they fall into. So anything above 0 is considered good, and anything above 50 is considered excellent. And, it's not just the employees of your company and the marketing organization that's promoting the brand. Like I mentioned before, it's really kind of the word on the street and what people are, commenting in social media places like Glassdoor on what their experience was with the company. So people that are above 50 are going to be a promoter and really promote your company, and detractors, which you want to have as few as possible, are going to be ones that have had negative candidate experience. So if you kind of do the math, there's a formula where you take the detractors and you take it out of the number of promoters. We'll tell you what your overall Net Promoter Score is. So source of hire, like I mentioned a couple slides ago, measuring your source of hire is really important because, as a lean recruiting team, it's really hard to kind of invest eggs in so many different baskets. There's different ways that you can source candidates, but you want to make sure that where you're investing your time and your money in building out a pipeline is really working for you. So you want to know the source of hire because it shows the holes in your funnel. And, for example, is it worth the cost of hire ratio? Are you spending a ton of money on a specific job board where you haven't hired anyone through that? Are you spending it through seeking out passive candidates through the LinkedIn Recruiter tool and find out that you're saving a ton of money that way? So there's a huge difference between the source of applicants versus the hire. And more applicants can be coming from one source, but more hires can be coming from another source. And the more longer-term employees, the ones who stay beyond 90 days, 2 years, and other metrics can be coming from another source. So keep that in mind, the headcount or quality of hires and the longevity that they stay. We've always found traditionally that the most effective source of hire that stays the longest and continue to perform at the highest level and also continue to refer additional candidates tend to be employee referrals. So that's a really sweet spot to want to be mindful of, making sure that you have a really robust policy that is communicated and it's something that everyone feels excited and motivated about. And so from there, I'll hand it over to JD, who's going to discuss how to build this lean recruiting team.
Awesome. So So we've talked about a few of these things that we can do that are core and important, and Jen and I have discussed, and I love that she jumped into those pieces of analytics and some of the most important things we need to start measuring now. And whether you have a tool to do it or a few tools that you can use to handle the analysis of that, or whether you need to build it in some spreadsheet somewhere or something, your numbers might not turn up a really powerful recruiting program now. But the good news is that even if you start out in a lean recruiting situation, it doesn't mean that you have to stay there. So getting specific metrics for your specific organizations helps you create recruiting plans based on reality and a good strategy up front, as opposed to reactionary panic that so often afflicts us in the industry here. And instead of saying what we can't do, let's present our metrics and show what you can do. So that way, executives and leadership teams and hiring managers can see what is possible, and we can build plans around that. So I'd say hyper-focus on good communications now. That is one of the aspects that you can do, is build in good comms programs for your hiring managers, your leadership, and your candidates. Especially as Jan talked about earlier, this good candidate experience equals good karma later. I call it the CNPS instead of ENPS or something like that, right? Talk about the CNPS score. Allows people to continue to recommend investigating jobs at your company. The other thing is forcing lead times and these lead time conversations well in advance. So start thinking 2 quarters in advance. Do the best you can to get as much accurate data as possible about what's happening in the business, so that we can understand how to build a strategy around that and when we need to deploy what resources when. Engage in the detail here. The ATS reporting, some of the analysis that Jan talked about as well, and the things you really need to know, these core things you need to know. And start looking at these time to hire steps, the details that are needed, what's specific to your region, right? What is happening in Jen's region, or maybe it's a national global search all the time. What's happening in these places? Get this data and understanding now, so that way you can communicate the message out and build some plans around it. So this is our greatest resource, and we're going to address these things. This communication and education is our greatest resource. And having this calm perspective helps you have a laser focus in doing the most with the time that you have. Instead of straining to have everything perfect and pain-free right now, just rely on a few of these effective strategies to grow your recruiting program on a solid foundation over time. So to recap, prioritize your requisitions. That means measuring requisition timelines, killing off the requisitions you can and need to, going to leadership or going to managers and saying, here's the problem, we're going to create a broken requisition timeline or a broken candidate experience, and here are the ramifications. That's what I would say. Just communicate the ramifications of each of the decisions that we're making, because you know it. You know the ramifications of adding 3 more requisitions onto one that when you already have 16 or something like that, right? Create this culture of recruiting, as Jan talked about, is this next point. You need more hands on deck, and it actually helps when the rest of your company understands the work that you are doing, and they understand more of the pieces of recruiting. They're able to be recruiters themselves, as it were. Crafting up and serving the right job description. It's something that's going to be able to help you really hone in on exactly the right applicants, as opposed to just opening the doors for a lot of people and a lot of applicants that really aren't the ones you're looking for, and making sure that there's absolute clarity in the process there and you have a solid, healthy pipeline as well. And then measuring your progress for these things. So make sure you stand up for an excellent recruiting program. Make sure you're communicating what you can do if you're given time resources, if you're given the ability to plan ahead. And it beats out this rushing forward kind of situation where everything is, I need somebody yesterday. It really beats out all of that. You can just start now with some of these things, and you're going to see a lot of dividends next year. Promise you that.
Great. Now it's time for Q&A. I know we're reaching the top of the hour, so a few reminders. We will be sharing the slides, recording, SHRM, and HRCI credits in an email following tomorrow morning. And let's dive into at least 2 or 3 questions. So thanks for hanging in with us, and apologize if we go a minute or 2 over. We have a few questions for Jan. Give us your 30-second response, but how do you calculate cost per hire as a recruiter?
Sure. So we do cost per hire in 2 ways. So we first like to just aggregate all the costs that we had. So what we paid on LinkedIn Recruiter tools, different engage campaigns that we did, even the salary of the recruiters, any contractors that we might have, any overhead that we experience as a recruiting department. We take that and we divide it amongst the number of hires that we made. And then for our second measurement, we also divide it into source. So we divide out all the new hires, divide it out into buckets by different source, whether they're employee referrals, whether they're passive candidates, whether they came in through a job board, which job board, and then we divide the people in each bucket by how much we spent on each source. And they'll give us a good idea of, by different buckets, like cost per hire for employee referrals will be like maybe between about $2,000 each, while if we hire them through like an agency, it might be like $20,000, $30,000 each, or a job board will be like $500 to $1,500 each. So we'll look at it kind of in 2 ways.
Great. JD, we had a question for you. When you were talking about job descriptions and job posting as ads, can you actually go over the differences between the 2?
Yes, thank you. So it's always been a hazy topic out there. Job descriptions and job ads end up being the same nomenclature. It's just lumped into the same bucket here. However, I define it with my team as a job description covers the details of all these core functions. It really goes in depth, things that you get from an intake meeting, from very comprehensive understanding about the job. Whereas a job ad, so that the job description is all the details you need to know to hire for it, to build scorecards and interviewing and everything. The job ad is a piece of marketing content, and that should be distilled down to exactly the deliverables you need to give to both entice candidates, the right candidates, and give enough self-selectors that you're dissuading ones that are not a fit for the position or that would otherwise be a time waste for us and for them, right? We want to make sure we're doing right by them as well. So communicating it well, I say job ad is a piece of marketing content, and so then we need to know where to position that out and know what platforms do you post that ad on. Not every single place of posting, as Jen talked about, is going to be helpful. So take that ad and put it in the right places to have the right eyeballs on it that will entice the right people.
Great. And our last question for today, we had a lot of response to, the candidate experience section. So Jan, can you talk a little bit more about the survey that we do and some of the items that we also provide and just a little bit more background about them?
Sure. The candidate survey, we send it out 2 weeks after they're here for their on-site. We used to send it out about 2-3 days after they're on-site, but we realized the feedback that we were getting was a lot less because at that point they haven't heard back about the decision from their on-site interview and they don't want to rock the boat, so the feedback was kind of being withheld. But 2 weeks after the on-site interview decision, they've already know what the decision is made, and we don't want that to kind of be able to hinder someone from wanting to give honest feedback because they don't want to, even though it's anonymous, we don't want them to feel like it's going to impact kind of the hire decision.
Great. And with that, that'll conclude our webinar. Thanks for hanging with us. I know we went a few minutes over. Again, all the materials will be shared with you guys tomorrow. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Jan and JD. Everyone, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.